How old are you?
I was doing that. Have you seen ASMR? I feel like that would be probably something that would not come on your For You page.
No, it's probably not.
No, they do like, so they'll literally take Coke cans and they'll flick them or like put like their fingernails like on them. They'll like tap like the microphone and they'll talk like this. And so when they're talking, it's something it's super peaceful for people to listen to, and it's a weird niche of people. It's very calming.
A weird niche.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll show you some videos afterwards. Maybe we can get a live reaction from Pastor James, seeing what that looks like.
Maybe.
So we want to welcome you guys to another episode of Experience the Truth. Today we're talking about the power of the tongue. Before we begin, though, I just want to say how thankful, speaking for the both of us, how thankful we are for your guys' compliments and your comments. And it's nice to know that this is making an impact, because we're not doing this to listen to ourselves afterwards or hear us talk. It came from, we want to know what you guys are asking. What are the things you're wrestling with your faith? And I think having these type of living room conversations can kind of we can get to the root of things, and hopefully the fruit of it would be a deeper relationship with Jesus, because that's the goal. Because ultimately it's just clanging cymbals if we're doing this all out of, just selfish ambition. So we're thankful for your comments, and this is why we do what we do, to hear from you guys. So if you guys want to introduce new topics, you want to see us talk about something else. I've heard marriage. I've heard people want to hear about how do you operate as a Christian in marriage. I hear people talk about, well, you talk about the Spirit, but what does that look like practically in my day-to-day life while operating in the Spirit? I've heard those things. So if you have anything, drop a comment and let us know what we should talk about next. But so the power of the tongue.
Yeah, I think, I feel like the topics we've kind of covered are a lot of foundational topics that every believer really needs to have some understanding in order to have success in their walk with Christ. But boy, this in and of itself, the power of the tongue, to recognize the power of the tongue in our life and how we use it. I mean, James likens it to a rudder of a ship. And he says the rudder of a ship determines the direction that ship's going in, and it's just a very little thing, such a little thing that you can, when you look at it, can think, wow, that really isn't significant, and yet on a ship, it's extremely significant. And if you lose control of the rudder, you lose control of the direction that ship is going in. And I think a lot of chaos in our homes, a lot of chaos in our life, in our workplaces, is due to the lack of respecting the tongue, the rudder of the tongue. And if you really want to go somewhere in the future, and you have a destination you're looking for to go in the future, you really have to consider the importance of your tongue in your life. And so it's a lot. This in many ways is elementary, but it's interesting because it's a lot of times we just don't give the importance to how we talk like we should, any importance to it.
James 1:26, if anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless.
Yeah, I mean, think of, I think a lot of times we can say things and not realize that what we're saying is almost becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like we agree with things that we don't want to agree with, and words and agreement, they go hand in hand. You can, if you've been married any length of time, one of the things we would tell people when they get married is don't say divorce in your fight. Well, in your first fight, if you get married, there are people who would literally that they make the statement, well, maybe we should get divorced. Those words become agreements and truly invite the enemy to come in and work in those areas of our marriages. So really, your words apply to every part of your life. And I think that's what we want to talk about. And we should start in the beginning. I think God used words. If words weren't important, then why does it say in Genesis that God used his words to create everything? Everything you see was created by the power of words. And in basic physics, for instance, if you break down this chair, you say, well, it's made of probably not leather, it's probably a fake leather, or whatever you want to call it. And you break it down, it's broken down into atoms and the neutrons, protons, and electrons. And those are neutrons, protons, and electrons are broken down into quarks. And quarks, when a quark is broken down, it's broken down into vibrations, something that is not seen. What's interesting about that, just physics, this is science, basic physics science. Everything is held together by a vibration. Vibrations that come together creating a quark that then creates electrons, protons, and neutrons that create atoms, that create the substance that we're sitting on. And when you realize that God spoke everything in, that was a vibration. The vibration, the voice, the words of God have to slow down in order to create what is all around us. And so if you're wondering, well, where is the real proof in it? It's scientific. Physics proves that there's no argument that everything is at its very primary state is a vibration. And so when you think about that, you're like, in fact, it says in the Bible that all things are held together by the words of God. That order, everything, all order around us is the sun rising, the sun setting, held together by the words of God. That his word that was spoken at creation is still reverberating and holding everything together. And then God created us in his image with the ability to speak. That's pretty incredible, because in the same way that his words held together things, we have the power of words that we read in Proverbs that is very clear. In fact, it says in Proverbs, the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat of its fruit. The power in the power of the tongue is life and death. That's incredible. If your life is struggling and you're going through, and then you really can begin to see that change just by understanding the power of your tongue and how you talk and what you say.
That's really interesting. I remember growing up, I would get so annoyed with this, but now I look at it and I'm like, oh, that's true. My mom and dad would literally not let it. I'm like, oh man, like I'm dying, or like, oh, I'm starving, or I'm like, oh, I'm so stupid, or like I would say things and they're like don't speak. They would always say, don't speak that, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it, I don't speak it, but this really sucks what I'm going through right now, or like what I'm feeling. I'm like, oh, you don't want to hear that person that's saying that, like, oh, words are powerful, I get it, but I don't want to hear that right now. And later on, I realized, I'm like, oh yeah, there was a spiritual aspect that I was overlooking, or I didn't find important, and I didn't yet believe it, that my words really were powerful, and they do dictate like the steps and order of my life if I truly do believe that I'm made in the image of God. But,
yeah, we have this saying, freedom of speech. I could say whatever I want. I have the freedom to say whatever I want. Sure, you have the freedom, but you don't have a freedom to choose what you get from what you say. No word is free. Every word has a cost. and it'll either cost you something or it's going to be an investment into something. Do you believe the Bible to be the Word of God? I think that's one of the things you have to come to, because you can know words make a difference, but until you believe words make a difference, you aren't going to take it seriously. So when you hear a scripture where it says the tongue has the power of life and death, if you believe that's true, then you're going to be more intentional about what you say and what you don't say. Especially, so here's an example. We had a teacher that told one of our daughters that it was okay, not every student is as smart as other students. And my daughter told me that the teacher had said that. And well, of course, if you know me, that just set me off. So I ended up in the principal's office with the teacher. So it's kind of funny. If I had to go to the principal's office because I was the one with the teacher, but this time I was there with the teacher, and the teacher was the one getting in trouble. And it wasn't that I wanted to get the teacher in trouble, but I told that teacher not to ever speak those words over my daughter again, because what that teacher was doing was teacher was putting death into the mind of my daughter, and we've been given the mind of Christ. And she was speaking words that was convincing my daughter that she wasn't as smart as maybe other students. And I told that daughter, I said, listen, God doesn't create junk. You're as smart as any other child. Now, she had to apply herself more, but she ended up graduating with a 4.0 grade point average. And that course of life would have been a whole lot different had we just allowed the words of a teacher to determine the steps of that daughter. And I think a lot of times we underestimate the power of words being spoken over our daughters. And here's the thing. This is what happens, Alex. When we don't confront, in 2 Corinthians it says, take captive every thought or every word. Make it obedient to Christ. When we don't take it captive, we enter an agreement with those words. We begin to accept those words. And when you come into agreement with those words, or you speak those words, what you're essentially doing is you're accepting that as truth, even though it's not truth. And then when it happens, we say, see, it was reality, it was truth. No. You empowered that reality in your life by what you said. That's why there's death. Well, look what happened in my life. Look, but it didn't need to happen. It didn't need to happen. There's a scripture that says, call things that are not as though they were. If you take the truth of the kingdom and you begin speaking that, it doesn't exist. But that scripture is saying you call it out into this atmosphere, into this reality, even though it doesn't exist, because one day it will exist. And essentially it comes back to, what are you agreeing with? And we agree with the words. And so it's so important that we take stock and keep accountable the words that we're saying. If you keep saying, I'm so dumb. Like, have you done something stupid?
Yeah.
Right? And you go, man, I'm so dumb and stupid. That was just stupid of me to do that. What do you think the odds are that you're going to do something stupid again? You continually, you essentially curse your future by agreeing with it, saying, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I'm not good enough, I'm not important enough, I don't charismatic enough. Isn't it amazing how the enemy gets us to agree with his lies, and we do it by our words? Sure, the thoughts will come. There's no agreement in the thought. Mm-hmm. The agreement comes when we speak it out of our mouth.
It's like, I feel like that's always rappers or like athletes or it's famous people. They have some chip on their shoulder, and for whatever reason, it's the first grade teacher or the high school teacher that you're just they just remember you'll amount to nothing, or you won't be this or that, or people that proved them wrong, or end up becoming their main source of motivation. I just think that's funny. And there's things that people have told me that I've said. I remember there was a teacher of mine in high school. They wanted us to write a note. She wanted us to write a note about the class or whatever. for like the following students. It was either that, I can't remember directly what it was, but that's not the point. That's kind of how I overlooked it, like what I wrote. But anyways, I wrote something like you're like the realest and most like genuine teacher I have ever had, and said something like nice and like specific to the one of the situations that I kind of gave specific kind of admiration about. And so like later she still has like we still talk from time to time, and she said like the thing like you said, I never forget what you like wrote to me or said about me. And I did not like think much about it. I just said what I was thinking, and it like stuck with her. It still like sticks with her. And it just, and there's been other times where people have told me, oh, when you said that, either for good or bad, where people remember that. And I'm like, oh, like, wow. You don't think about it sometimes because they're just, to you, it's just, it's just because words are like breathing. We just do them when we communicate. But sometimes until you see the fruit of it, like, oh, wow, it's either regret by wishing you didn't say that thing, or joy when you're like, man, I didn't realize that had an impact on you. I'm going to be more intentional with my words.
Yeah, that is, I mean, our ministry is the ministry of reconciliation. Mm-hmm. And you can say, well, how does that look? That's what Paul says. We have the ministry of reconciliation, of reconciling people to God. Well, how do you do that? Very simply, by recognizing the tool of your words.
Yep.
Right? Well, I wouldn't know what to say. Well, like you just said, which was such a great illustration, when you spoke that into her life, there could have been thoughts she was going through where she was starting to believe that she wasn't a good teacher. And not saying there was, but the possibility is there. Certainly there are teachers that maybe I'm not that good of a teacher. What difference am I making? And then you speak life to where death had been. Your words became life to her. And if we recognized words have the power to bring life to me. Mm-hmm. Words have the power to bring life to the people around us. Mm-hmm. And when we say things to people maybe who fail, like if you go to a restaurant and the waitress is doing a terrible job, the natural reaction is to let them know we're very dissatisfied with the service. Certainly we've all been there, and we've been that person that's expressed. But what we really were doing was just contributing words that would bring death to that person, rather than recognizing that I could actually help her and bless her by speaking life to her. It's funny, when I played basketball, and there was a guy, I remember it well, he kept missing shots, and he goes, GD, God damn, is what he said. And I thought to and I said out loud, you don't want that to happen. It's already bad enough. Yeah. And he looked at me, and then later found out I was a pastor. And he was the same guy who said Jesus Christ, and I'm like, yeah, you need his help. Those are like words, they say words. You say it flippantly because you're angry, and you think because you were angry when you said it that they were empty words. Mm-hmm. You think, oh, well, I was upset when I said that, so it doesn't count because I said it out of emotion. We somehow think because I was angry or upset, I didn't really mean it. So because I didn't mean it, those words no longer have power. Those words are power. Satan is literally crouching at your door, waiting for permission to destroy your life, to destroy your marriage, to destroy your family, to destroy your work, to destroy everything. And even when you get angry, and you, out of anger, express things, you have to recognize those words are coming into agreement with Satan's plans in your life, and you have to take captive the thought. It's not the thought that brings you into agreement with those plans. It is the word that comes out of your mouth. And I think, Jewish people, we do this all the time. We say things we don't know. Oh, I was just lucky, or it was just a coincidence. Or we chalk it up to just fate, right? Jewish people say when you say I'm lucky, what you're saying is you're coming in agreement with Lucifer, which lucky is his nickname. We're giving Lucifer credit for what I just experienced, rather than saying thank you, God, for the blessing in my life, recognizing with my mouth, speaking gratitude to the Lord, we're giving gratitude to happenstance, to Lucifer. So, it's something I think we and don't you agree? We're in a culture when you have everything's being said.
Yep.
No respect for words.
No.
All kinds of things. People are being attacked. More than ever, we have to become a generation of believers that don't take for granted the power of words.
Mm-hmm. There's a scary thought, and a lot of times I'm like, oh, I think about that. I'm like, I just said that, and I'm like, forgive me, God, because I know I'm going to be held accountable for the words that I say. And in Matthew 12:36, it says, I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak.
And if words weren't that important, why would it matter?
Yeah, it's crazy. And then the next verse says, for by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned.
Is that New Testament?
Yeah, for real. No, they're just loving, and it's such a weird thought, and I think I think we think of, I heard it said like this. There's like a process of becoming a Christian, like your maturity. You start off seeing God as the Lamb, a loving Father, just like a kid does. And that's it. You mature and you only see him as the harsh punisher, and like there's like a fear that takes place with God. But true maturity is seeing him as both. That there is yes, he is loving and he is so good, and it's amazing in the grace that he gives. But don't take that for granted, that there is a harshness with God, and he is the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. That this immense, powerful being that created everything with words, and it's all held together by his words. That's a scary thought, but it's like it should produce wisdom. Not that we should have anxiety about it, but I think that, like, when we recognize that, do we truly believe the power and sovereignty of God, and that we were created in his image, and at one point we're going to have to give an account for every word we speak? I think when we understand that is when it'll dictate, and our life will look a whole lot differently, not just with our words, but other areas and aspects of our life, when we realize what I'm doing here matters.
Yeah, your words matter. I think we think we're insignificant. There are things, I think, that I've preached before, and I don't know, I knew them and I knew it was truth, but I don't know that I believed it until I went through it, and I'm like, man, that's exactly what I know to be true, and it happened, and you become a believer. I think there's a lot of moments in our life where we become a believer in things. Like, we know that that's the case, but then there's that moment where you believe it. And it's the revelation that changes us to where we actually take it serious. Like what we're talking right now about words, we all know.
Yeah.
We've all know that words make a difference. We just don't believe they do.
It's true.
So when we're in a pit or we're in a situation, we can often say things flippantly, not even taking seriously what we're saying, because we know they make a difference. We just don't believe they make a difference. And it's when you get that revelation that, whoa, wait a minute. I've already said I'll probably die by the time I'm 31. Well, you're going to probably die by the time you're 31, not because that was God's plan, but because you gave the enemy permission to take your life at 31. My marriage will never make it. Well, not because God didn't want to help you in your marriage to make it, but because you gave the enemy permission through your words to destroy your marriage so it wouldn't make it. I mean, we're calling things that are not as though they were.
Yeah.
That's positive, and that can be negative. You have to recognize that God gave you a mouth because he wanted you to be able to use it to bless, not curse. And they've even shown where like plants, this is legitimate living things like plants. They have this study, and you can find this on YouTube, where they spoke life to the plant, and the plant thrived, and other plants that they cursed, and the plant died. And you're like, what? Like, if that's where you're at, it's because you don't believe there's power in your words. You don't believe there's power in your words. You have to recognize that every creation is, at its very foundational form, is a vibration. And your voice is a vibration. And it impacts the vibrations of creation. And this is the lack of understanding of just pure science. We don't understand science, so we don't realize how this isn't make-believe. Like, this is literally the interaction of biblical things, spiritual things with creation. God created it all, and so they intersect. And so if I took your child and I kept telling them how dumb they were, useless they were, how they never added up or never did what their brother or sister did, that child is not likely going to succeed in life or thrive in life. And here's why. Because the vibrations of your mouth have intersected in a way with them, and they've literally entrained, which is another word, meaning that, like, the vibrations of their existence is literally entrained with your words, and you've essentially spoken death. The power of life and death is in your tongue. You've essentially set them up for that.
There's a verse, it's in Proverbs 18:19, because I think there's defilement by our words, there's life, there's curses that we can bring by our words, but also I think people will ask, how do I use words in my day-to-day life, which this is day-to-day that what we're talking about. But I think this is a great verse in how we handle non-believers or people that we disagree with, which is a huge thing right now in culture. I really love this in Proverbs 18:19. It says, a brother who has been insulted is harder to win back than a walled city, and arguments separate people like the barred gates of a palace. I think that's so interesting. Your Proverbs 11:17 says, your own soul is nourished when you are kind, but you destroy yourself when you are cruel. It's the words that we speak. A lot of times we think we can win people by an argument to show them life. But an insult actually closes people up like a barred like gate. And I've seen that because there's been some times where I think it's due to insecurity with my faith. And I feel like if you're not convinced, there's an insecurity with me thinking maybe I'm wrong, and I'm defending it because I'm like, I need this to be right because I'm kind of unsure of this, and you need to believe the same thing I believe. But there's no patience, and so then we end up cursing people or throwing them to the wayside by disrespecting them with our words when we're trying to win people over.
Yeah, and how often do you do that when you fight? Like, it becomes personal. So we attack them because they're not seeing it our way. We get frustrated, and then we use our words to attack them because I'm going to kill you. And that's how we ended up with the world wars.
Yeah.
You know, who yells louder, who can be more aggressive and attack more, make you feel worse. You don't win battles that way. You destroy people that way. I just lost my thought that I just had.
I like saw it.
Did it just fly out of my head?
I just watched it leave. But yeah, there's not like, I just remember I'm looking up all these verses that are having to do with the tongue, and we talk about life, and I'm like, that's an interesting one because I see a lot of Facebook posts, especially when it comes politics and in that season, are condemning people with different beliefs. You will never, like what you say, you'll never win someone to Christ if you hate them.
Yeah, never.
You won't. And it's your words. And I think it's, and what you said something, I remember in a message where it's like, if you have a problem with someone, like how often are you praying for that someone? And it'll change the way you think of that person. And our words, I think, kind of dictate that when we complain about something.
So if you have a problem with your spouse, I think what we do a lot of times in marriage is we point out that problem with our spouse. We don't like it when you do this. We don't like it when you do that. And we constantly come back to what I don't like. And then what we're saying is we're actually speaking life. Now there's death. We're not. It's not that you can't bring up that this is something I would love to see change in our relationship. But when we speak it, the reason we don't like those conversations, if you're receiving that, is because it comes like death. It almost, I'm a failure. I don't add up. This is where I'm falling short. And it's often never the case where they're speaking, you know what, you do this really well. We often are quick to speak things to point out what we don't like with our words, and rarely do we often say what we love and give life and life and life. Even it's a lot more work to take time to examine how I'm going to address something in someone that I don't like in a way where it's life-giving as opposed to being life-taking. You know, one of the things in weddings that I'll bring up, because I think it's in marriage, why so many marriages are falling apart, is not because marriage is harder today. I think it's because we are terrible at communicating. More than ever, we communicate poorly. We're more insecure, and we just communicate poorly. And one of the things I'll bring up, and I really believe this, because in weddings I'll say your words are really one of the more important things in marriage, how we talk, words of life or words of death. And it's a lot like this. If you're going into surgery and you're going under, and right before you go out, you hear, no, 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 and it's a chainsaw. The likelihood of you coming out of that surgery better than you were going in is not good. Sure, you may take out whatever needs to be taken out of your body, but your lung, your heart, your spleen, your kidney might come with it. A chainsaw is not created to do fine work. It's created to do quick work, often leaving no precision. When you go into surgery, you need a scalpel that is designed to cut away what needs to be cut away and bringing health to the rest of the body. I think we go into marriage using our words more like a chainsaw to be fast and quick and get it, but we end up making a whole mess of everything else in that relationship. You have to learn to use words, and you really need the Lord to help you with that, to use your words in a way where you can cut away those things that are hurting the body while leaving the rest of the organs intact. You know, whenever my wife says we need to talk, there's something in me goes, oh no. But when she words it, you know, James, I really love how you really are working hard. I see how you're trying to do this, and I appreciate that. And this is something that, and when she approaches it that way, it's really life-giving. Like, and it makes it a lot easier to hear what she's having to say. Not yelling louder. We're not trying to overshout each other, but we're actually having a conversation where we can grow together, and we're not worried about, well, she's going to hate me. She's going to throw me to the, you know, there's life there.
There's, I remember a couple of times I learned this from a pastor that was mentoring me, and it started out with this lady, just terrible service, bad attitude, and he's like, here, let's get how much you got in your wallet right now? I'm like, let's just bless her and just watch her face. And we just said kind words to her, and we're like, oh, you did such like a great job. And to see her reaction was just like, it opened up a conversation and whole demeanor changed. I've done that a couple times. There was one time where I walked into a Jimmy John's late, and I could tell like it was still 30 minutes left. I think high school students just get irritated because they want to close up and go home. So they want to close early. So I'm coming in, and I can tell this girl that had a bad attitude. She was not a fan. She's like, comes up like, what do you want? And just giving me the business. And I'm like, I'm kind of irritated. I'm like, okay. And just kind of ignoring me and not really like, just being really rude. And and then at the end, I remember I'm like, man, God bless you. You're doing such a good job. Thank you for being patient with me. And I know it's late. I'm sorry that not like I know what it's like to work in the food business. And when people come in, it's like, oh, I just cleaned all this stuff up. So I'm sorry for doing that to you. And I'm like, here you go. And just to see her face, and she's like, oh, I didn't. And she apologized to me. I didn't say anything, but she apologized the way that she acted to me. And I didn't have to say anything. I think a lot of times we're so focused on being right that we forget where people are at. And it's like, man, like they've been kicked all day. Like you kicking them again is not going to make them, I'm going to be nice now.
And if you have the ministry of reconciliation and that's your identity,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a reconciler for Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a reconciler for Jesus. When you go into that situation, you're like, oh, this is an opportunity to bring life to this person. Maybe I came to be served, but maybe God put me here to serve
Mm-hmm.
this person. Like I'm coming,
Mm-hmm.
like when you go into those situations, and then you recognize, okay, first thing I'm going to use. What's the first thing you can use to reconcile people? Your words.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing you can do is using your words to reconcile.
Mm-hmm.
So words reach not just like relational in your life and the future, which I want to bring up next, but you had an opportunity to reconcile her to Christ by just the use of your words.
Mm-hmm.
The power and the life that you brought to change her in that moment, change her attitude with your words. You were like a rudder on her ship.
Mm-hmm. There's been times where I literally was just talking to like our media team about this in our group, talking about how, in leadership, you have runners. They talk about there's like runners, walkers, and people that are just like on the bus and they're not doing anything, like just kind of spectators. And you look at the runners and the people that you have in your congregation that are just kind of self-sufficient. They don't need the pat on the backs, as it seems. They're confident in themselves. And so a lot of times leaders will not recognize or give compliments or encouragement to those because they don't need it. And we spend time on the people that are spectators to manipulate them into getting to serve or get to that next step in their faith. And it's the runners that actually deserve the more encouragement. So a lot of times people, because they don't hear that affirmation and just like bro, I need a pat on the back. Sometimes I need, you're doing a good job. Like
You're doing a good job, Alex.
Thank you. But it's funny because
too,
it's like when you think that I've heard it said, like Craig Rochelle said something like this, when you think that you've given like enough encouragement, go do then something, like go above and beyond with it, because you never can give too much encouragement, and people need it. We need it as human beings. It's like I'm not working for the approval of man, so don't get it twisted, but to be recognized and to get life spoken over you. There's a different type of, like, when you're doing, like, we all work hard, but when you get life spoken into you, or even like recognition, and be like, man, I notice what you're doing, thank you for what you do. There's a different type of, like, I've had it happen where the attitude just changes, and it's like, I'm making a difference. Like, I really needed to hear that. We're humans, we're not robots, and there's something about it where it talks about it's like nourishment to the soul. And what would that do if you weren't? I mean, like, what does that look like in your life right now? Who in your life, it says that pagans can love people that love them. We're called to love our enemies like Christ did. So who in your life needs to hear that but probably doesn't deserve it?
Well, yeah. I mean, you can change, like if you have a boss that's just been rude, by the power of your tongue, you can speak life into them in a way. You often hurt people.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can often get someone who's really frustrated or struggling because they're under pressure, and then they put it on you.
Yeah.
You could change that by the power of your
words.
tongue, your words. I have a formula that if you want to know where you're going in your future, and we become very future conscious, very success conscious. How am I going to be successful? How am I going to live out my life? I mean, really, you get all these pictures on the wall of how are you going to be successful? What you're listening to will go through your ear gate. What you let in your ear gate goes through your ear gate. It drops into your heart. That's where we take it captive, right here at the ear gate. What we're hearing, we have to take captive, because it can be death or it can be life.
Yep.
If you're going to stop this, it has to stop at the ear gate. What are you listening to? Because you're saying, well, I can't help myself. I keep saying words, and they're death and they're destructive. It's because you're letting things in your ear. You're listening to people who are literally broadcasting death to you. You're letting it into your ear. It goes into your heart. From your heart, the Bible says, out of your heart, your mouth speaks. And then the words in James says the words that come out of your mouth will prophesy or predict your future. That what you're speaking today is going to take you to the place of where you're going in the future. So if you're gonna impact future, if there's a future you want to get to, you don't stop it here and you don't stop it here, you stop it here at the ear. Mm-hmm. You really need people around you that are speaking life, first of all, and they're not tearing down other people. They're not, and it's easy to get caught up in that, where we're tearing down people we think are that deserve it, and we get even a little worked up. You have to recognize when you entertain that attitude and those words, it actually it's ruminating in your heart, and then it comes out of your mouth, and it's dictating your future. And you have to recognize the power of words. That's why you don't want to be around people that are constantly tearing down politicians and bosses and leaders and pastors that get all in the negative thing. We focus so much on tearing down, and then we don't think it's going to have any effect in your life. It's going to have an enormous effect in your life and your relationships and your we're never going to get out of debt. We're never going to get out of it. You're never going to get out of debt, because your words are literally, you're coming into agreement with debt. And that's exactly what the enemy wants you to believe. And that's exactly what the enemy wants you to think, that your words have nothing to do with why you're in debt. We're in debt because we spend money, or I don't make enough money, or I don't get treated. That's what the enemy wants you to think. Your words have nothing to do with it, and they have a lot to do with it.
Yeah, there is, I think, as we wrap up, there's a lot. I think there's people that are coming to your mind right now, and I think there's different, like God's bringing things up to your mind, not to accuse you or condemn you, but to challenge you. If if Christians don't speak life, who is going to speak life in this world? We are the only ones who have hope. We're supposed to be conduits of hope, and I think a lot of times the enemy has used us to be mouthpieces of fear, hate, and it's tricked us to I've said this before, to weaponize our faith. We should weaponize our faith in the sense to come against the enemy. That Jesus, when he comes down in the end of days, his tongue will be a sword, and he'll be splitting things in two. And just like everything created is vibrations. That's how, for whatever reason, that's what it's going to be. And you have power in your tongue. It is a sword, and it is a weapon when you align yourself with God's will and his word and truth. We're to be salt of the earth. So what are you doing? Are you seasoning people around you? Are you bringing life, or are you just being a problem pointer? It's really easy to poke holes at people and problem point, because we live in a broken and sinful world. But what can you do to change your atmosphere? And that starts with your words.
Before we end, there's one other thing that I want to bring. We see it in Ephesians. Mm-hmm. But I really want you to see this. I want you to envision there are people that are hurting. I want you to see their hurt, their wounds, just the garbage of life that's on people. And if someone were to come in and they were dirty, they've been through it, they've been through a war, the first thing they would need would be to be cleaned. And Ephesians says that we can cleanse them with the washing of the word.
Wow, that's good.
And one of the things I think we can do, we think, well, that's praying for them. I think it's listening to them, and then it's communicating truth. It's really using our words to wash them, to recognize through this battle they've picked up some lies. And I just want to wash you with the truth. And just kind of a washing. And we need that. When we sow it, we reap it. The more you sow, you say, well, it's hard work to say words that do that. Listen, do you need it? Because if you need it and you need to reap that, farmers plant seed because they need a harvest. We need to eat. So they do the work of planting seed because they know it's going to feed us. this is so true. If you need it, and I know you do, every one of us need to reap that washing in our life, because we're all in this. We're all going through it. You sow that by washing people with your word. And so even when you're doing it, I want you to visualize, like if you're a visual person like I am, to literally when you're talking to see, boy, I'm just going to wash them. I'm not saying don't be, you need to be authentic. You need to be real. Don't just make it up, because that will actually serve a contrary purpose and people don't want to be manipulated. But to ask the Holy Spirit to give you the ability to just wash them. It's incredible how it will create a relationship with that person that you will need, that will become an important relationship in your life, and you will reap it, because other people, when you're in that place, are going to come and wash you as well.
Yeah, so I pray this blesses you, and I pray that this would not just be empty words, that you're just, it's in one ear and out the other. I pray that you would take this into practice. Like, I want to hear, like, email me your stories. We want to hear your stories, like how you put this into practice, because ultimately, if you're not taking it and putting it into action, what are we doing? We're just listening, but we're not doing anything with our faith. I know when I hear something or I hear a message, I want to see how I can apply that in my life. And there's always things that we can work on. Maybe this is something that changes relationships in your life, or helps you, show people the love of Christ. So if you have any questions, or you want to tell us a story or a testimony of, the podcast, or I'm hoping that I would get some stories about you putting this into practice, you can email me at pastoralex@bethelsrock.org, pastoralex@bethelsrock.org. We would love to hear from you. We want to know your questions, but we look forward to hearing from you. We love doing this. We love being able to kind of be a part of your daily routine. We will see you guys next week for the next episode.